Welcome to the NFP Podcast, where we explore the empowering world of natural family planning. I'm Amy Smith. Join me and my co-host Emily Appledorn each week. Together, we're here to dive deep into the science, the stories, and the spirituality behind NFP. Every week, we push back against the free love culture and advocate for a culture of responsible love, where intentionality and respect are at the forefront of family planning. Join us as we discuss everything from the practicalities of charting and fertility awareness to the profound impact NFP can have on relationships and communities. Whether you're new to NFP or a seasoned pro, our podcast is your go-to resource for honest conversations, expert insights, and real-life experiences. So grab a friend, settle in, and get ready to be inspired. This is the NFP Podcast. All right, so welcome back to the podcast. Today, Emily and I are going to be wrapping up our talk on discussion about what is NFP. And as I was reading a book this week, Emily, have you read the book by Lisa Henderson Jackson, I think? Henderson Jack. It's called The Fifth Vital Sign.
No, I have not. No.
It's really good. I like it a lot. She does some really good work. She's got a great podcast called Fertility Friday. Have you heard Fertility Friday?
No, I'm going to write it down.
Okay. It's good. I like it. So in this book, I was reading this chapter she has on the pill and your fertility. And the section that I was reading, it was talking about how the pill works. So she's talking about how the pill works and the underlying mechanisms of it. And this is I'll wrap this into what NFP is, I promise. So the first part, she goes into she breaks it down that hormonal contraceptives are so effective because they do three things. They interfere with ovulation, they interfere with implantation, and they prevent your cervix from producing fertile quality mucus. And then she goes on to break each of those sections down. So she goes on to say how it interferes with ovulation, or it tries to interfere with ovulation would probably be a better way to say that. And I'm going to use this, but I don't mean this as a severe critique to her. I think the way what she's describing, I think, just speaks to the wider population of our understanding of when human life begins. And that is very much in line with what NFP is and what our broader understanding of human sexuality and why this is such a bedrock of our faith and our church's teaching on marital love and marital intimacy, and why we can't use these type of methods because we believe life begins at the moment of conception, and that Christ was incarnate, right? It became his incarnation, that moment of his conception. Because Christ touched it, it became holy, it became sacred, all the way through the moment of death, which is why, oftentimes at Mass, sometimes you'll hear the priest during the prayers of the faithful, or whoever's reading the prayers of the faithful, will say, we're going to pray for the sanctity of life from the moment of conception until the moment of natural death. But in this book, you hear kind of the way that it's often thought of when we have a mindset that isn't from the moment of conception to natural death, or an understanding of when life begins. So in this section, this idea of interfering with ovulation, the fact that these methods are not 100% effective means that sometimes you could have a breakthrough ovulation. But so the creators of hormonal contraceptives know that. So they have the backup, right? The other underlying mechanism. So let's say we're trying to prevent ovulation by messing with hormones, but say we ovulate. Well, then we've got to take care of the next stage. So you ovulate. What would be the next thing would be implantation. So how can we take care of implantation? Well, we can create another mechanism that really thins the uterine lining and creates such an inhospitable environment so the baby cannot latch onto the lining. So therefore the life would be lost. And then the third underlying mechanism of action is that infertile or poor fertile quality mucus, which means that it's trying to prevent sperm from even getting into the fallopian tube, right? To fertilize an egg, should the egg be released. So whoever made it, right, obviously knows how the system works, because that's pretty good. Like, okay, we're going to try on these three fronts to prevent conception, to prevent a pregnancy. In the text, she writes, quote, "Pregnancy can only occur when your endometrial lining has fully developed." And when I read that sentence, Emily, I thought, no, actually, pregnancy is taking place. Pregnancy has already happened before that endometrial lining has fully developed. The pregnancy will be sustained if you have a fully developed lining, but pregnancy already happened at that moment of conception. And I feel like that is such a crucial point. Part of me was a little like kicking myself. Why didn't we like bring that up in the first part? Because that's like a really big part of our understanding of natural family planning, of human sexuality, of the sacredness of that act and the responsibility that that act demands. That we're dealing with life. We're dealing with the potential generation of new human life. So what do you think about that? I think that speaks pretty true to what most people, or users, right? Like if I'm in that mindset of using birth control, even if I'm a Christian and I'm using birth control, maybe unaware of the abortifacient nature, but I just think, oh, well, it doesn't, the pregnancy, I can keep pushing the start in my human mind where I can rationalize, I can keep pushing the start of pregnancy further and further off into the distance, Now, well, it's not really a baby until it comes out of my body. Then it's really a baby, and even then maybe it's still got an hour before it's actually a baby. I feel like that's somehow the thinking can go that far if we don't nip it in the butt, really. So what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts?
I wonder if she's meaning, or I wonder if she's inferring pregnancy as in terms of carrying a baby, right? Like as opposed to using the word conception. But I feel like most secular descriptions don't even use the word conception because they don't,
right.
It's almost like they don't even want to talk about when that happens. It really does default a lot of times to implantation as being the pregnancy in the terms of what she used. So I wonder if I'd be being generous if she was inferring that, pregnancy meaning carrying the baby, but that the baby was already created. I'm confident that's not the case, but like I said, I think that's a lot of people don't even want to talk about when the baby was created.
And that's why that's one of the reasons I think why natural family planning can be hard, because it puts you between that rock and that hard place of like, okay, if conception is the moment that a new human life begins and I do something that prevents that baby then from having life because I shed my lining or I make my lining, I perforate it with some type of a device that makes it inhospitable, then that baby is being lost. So I say all that and I bring up this part in the book. And then, of course, it just kept popping up in different sections, just talking about the pregnancy and using even just terms, right? Like the pregnancy, the fetus. It's because it's easier than saying the baby and the person, because those words kind of touch a spot that, again, demands responsibility, demands accountability, demands that I do something, demands justice, right? Because this is a human life. So I bring that up because I wanted to say I think that's a really big part of when we define natural family planning. And that has a lot to do with kind of that worldview, is that we view life beginning at the moment of conception, and that we are responsible for our actions leading up to that. We have to be responsible for them, and we're accountable to them or for them to God. So
most people don't want to think about that idea, right, of something happening that was out of their control. It makes you dig deeper. It makes you self-reflect. It makes you it brings up all these other feelings. So it's easier to use those terms when talking to someone about anything, right? Because it doesn't bring up that vulnerability of what could have happened if we just ignore that aspect, which is done by using those terms, in my opinion. Right. You just completely take that out of the idea that you're actually talking about a life.
And do you remember, I remember when I learned that birth controls had these mechanisms of action. I think it was an adoration, and I was reading a book on NFP or theology of the body, one of those topics. And I read about this, and I remember looking up at the monstrance, and I just started crying because I thought of my previous life choices and that I just didn't know. And hopefully I didn't conceive and abort any babies, but that I very well could have. And obviously I did not know any of those things, at the time that I was doing that. But just that sadness of all that life that's lost, and knowing how many people have intercourse now on hormonal contraceptives, and we just don't know. So we have the numbers of abortions that we know of, right? And then we have the numbers of abortions that we don't know of. And this falls into that category. If we believe life begins at conception, then the loss of a life between the moment of conception and implantation also counts as that. And whether it's, a miscarriage or like an intentional thing, but I just felt this awareness and this guilt. And I also, at the same time, Emily, I remember feeling very much in awe of women who had the courage to, when they got pregnant, to not have an abortion and to carry the baby and either to mother or to give it up for adoption. Because I almost thought in a way, I was like, the way I did it, right? Like I never got a positive pregnancy test when I was on hormonal contraceptives or living in that way. But it was almost like I was too much of a coward to do that. Like I wasn't responsible. I wasn't brave for the decisions that I made. And that's not a shaming. That's kind of been a reality. I was not responsible. I was irresponsible, and I was selfish. And I just saw those women as being much better than me. So, yeah. Do you remember kind of when you learned about this and what your thoughts were?
I don't remember specifically when that was really made known to me, but I know how I feel about it and how I just don't remember the circumstance of where I was, but I know how I feel about it now and understanding what I understand. And it really sickens me to think about how often that probably happens, and what I won't know, what we won't know until we get to heaven, until we stand before the throne of God. So I don't think a lot of people know that, because just like we were talking about, it's not talked about. Nobody uses those terms when we're talking about life. And so I feel like if someone knew that and continued to use contraception, that's hard for me. But at the same time, I feel like maybe you can cut this part out. I'm not sure what I'm trying to say, except that we should be educated enough on all of our choices, right? And whether they're immoral or not, I mean, we should make decisions with what we're doing based on research and knowledge and just education about whatever that is. And so it's just there's a lot of selfishness that goes behind using contraception. Yeah.
And when we say, when we talk about natural family planning and the concept of it being, a way of responsible love, that, that's not necessarily the most quote unquote like sexy term, right? Oh, I want to have responsible love in my marriage. People don't say that. But it is the title of Carol Tia's book, right? Love and Responsibility.
Yes.
So So it is a thing that a very famous person, very famous person wrote about. But the reason that I like that idea of responsible love is that it makes us think as rational human beings then before we engage in sexual intercourse, to stop and to recognize kind of almost like in awe of the act that we're going to engage in, to say that this act has the power to bring forth life, and that are we responsible and ready and willing enough to accept that? Because that's a part in the Cretan model follow-up, I remember, right? Is that you ask, there's somewhat an awkward section. I remember it sometimes being awkward, that you ask like, so, and I worked with couples that would use this method and they weren't necessarily of a faith. They were just coming to use it to either avoid a pregnancy or oftentimes trying to achieve. And the question was, you can correct me, I'm like, so you're teaching now still. But it's basically like, you're trying to get at what would you do? Your goal is to avoid a pregnancy. What would you do if you achieved a pregnancy? And we're trying to figure out, like, are you going to try to have an abortion if you get pregnant? Like, how strong do you feel about that intention? And what is your worldview about it? Like, is your worldview that, well, no, because my desire is to avoid, should I achieve? Well, that is not what my desire was. And so we are going to get rid of that baby because I didn't want that. And so the outcome has to match my desire. And basically what we're saying is that the responsible love approach, the idea of natural family planning, is that I'm entering into every act knowing that that is a possibility, and I'm willing to accept that possibility. Does that make sense? Is that right? Isn't there a question like that, Emily?
Yes. The term is, what is your receptivity to an unplanned pregnancy?
Thank you. Yes.
And so, you're trying to gauge what their intentions are if that happens. And then in some way, discuss if it comes up, how that's not, if somebody has the thoughts of, aborting a pregnancy, aborting a baby, then that's not a way to use the Cretan model in particular. Right. So,
I just think I don't know. I guess I don't have much else to say really about what is an NFP. I'm trying to think if there's anything else we've left out. We talked about, I just think that's like the crucial part. If someone had to ask like, why NFP, I think this would be, if I was going to explain it, it would be the crux of it. It's because we believe that the moment of conception is when new human life begins. And that is sacred and it has to be respected. And, I don't know. To me, this is just like such a big point.
I feel like just by saying what you're saying, I feel like I need to think about that when talking to married couples, engaged couples, because I think if someone would have said that to me, just like you just did, I don't know, it just makes sense. Maybe it's where I am in my life now, but it seems so simple now. But when I think it really comes down to when you know all the ins and outs of it, and how it works, it just really makes it brings it more to life, if you will. Mm-hmm. How do you actively choose to disregard life by continuing to use it? Mm-hmm. That's hard.
Yes, it is. I think it's that the moment of conception paired with who God is, and that this act is to image God. That with those two things, I think the way my brain works is that it just leads to, okay, natural family planning is the foregone conclusion then, because the moment of conception is the start of human life. And once life starts, we can't stop it. We don't get to be in control of that. And then who God is. Well, God is all giving, right? God is a communion of persons, and his love begets more love and life, and there's no barriers to his love. He's always pouring out love and life. Well, then the greatest act in our human experience that images that is the sexual act. So that has to image God because that's what it's made to image. Well, then that can't have barriers, and that can't be, if it's life-giving, well, then life can't be conceived outside of that act and then reintroduced to that act. Everything just gets so messy, It reminds me, I had a really good friend who she recently passed away. She was a religious sister, and she told me once when I was early, kind of coming back to the faith, early in my journey, and I was trying to discern God's will, and it just felt this like, what is God's will? That's a really big thing, right, Emily? And she said, Amy, God's will is peace. It's peace. Where there's peace, that's God's will. And I was like, that can't be. And it's too simple. I was like, that's not it. It's got to be more complex. And I think about this and some of the issues now, and people will say, well, it's so nuanced. It's so complex. It's so this. I'm like, it's actually not. It's actually not. It's convenient if it is, because then we can have all these outs, right? I can justify and reason myself down all these like holes, like, oh, pregnancy doesn't really start until implantation. Pregnancy doesn't really start until the baby is born. It's not really a baby until this point. Like if I keep going down that train or down that rabbit hole, I can rationalize kind of anything I want. Just on the other side, right? God says to be fertile and to multiply. God says to have children. So of course I can do IVF. Of course I can do IUI. Well, God didn't just say have kids, but that children have to come through the act of love, that there's a specific means by which human life is to come about. So yeah, I think like those two things are kind of the crux of it. And everyone, go ahead.
We take him out of it when we take anything outside the body, right? He's completely, because he is in that marital embrace, that is how we come together and how we show love and how he pours grace into us, a means of how he pours grace into us. And so when we take anything outside the body, we're taking him out of it. We're taking him out of that marital embrace, which is how he created us to love and be loved and with him within a marriage. So, I just realized as we're talking about this, so once again, I'm thinking about my engaged couples that I meet with. I just assume that people know some of these things, and something so simple as conception and when life begins. And within the Creighton model, which is the method that I teach and am familiar with, there's a slide in the intro that talks about that. But it's not something that I spend a ton of time on. I'm just realizing like I maybe need to not take for granted that everyone understands just the physiology and what our faith teaches, because those go hand in hand. We believe what our bodies are doing. And so we believe that conception occurs when the sperm penetrates the egg and life begins. And so I'm just realizing that perhaps that's not an understood among all couples. And so it's just making me think about that and really explain that to people, because just something so simple that I understand now, but how if someone doesn't understand that completely, that can influence their decisions, right? And because it's just a lack of knowledge.
Okay.
I understand.
The first thing that you said, I started smiling because I thought this past week, even just since we recorded the first part of this, I really started not thinking differently, but thinking again about, okay, that the marital embrace, right? That sexual act in marriage, what that represents. And that God, like what you just said, that God is in the body, that God is glorified in that act of the coming together of spouses. And it's a new it's a spin on the phrase of like getting in the mood, if you will. Do you know what I mean, Emily? It is like to think like, wow, again, to approach it with awe and to say, okay, this isn't like just something my husband and I are coming together to do or something, okay, my spouse really wants to do, so I'm going to do this now. Like that this is a renewal of our marriage vows. This is a joining together with God in this bonding of our bodies and our souls. Like this is profound, and I'm human and everyone else is human. And most of the time we're not going to engage in sexual intercourse thinking that way, right? Like usually, it's usually that is not how I enter into that act. But like that is something to think about on the regular if I can, like to really, again, I think that expression is used in like a secular, not the way I'm using it here, but it's funny because I can apply it here of like, to get in a godly mood about sex, Emily.
Absolutely. And
that's totally what you just said. I was like, I'm putting words in your mouth now, but like it is like to get in like that godly mood. And when especially if I'm like really tired or like just not at all, it's almost like that could be like a grace and like a helper to remember that this is not just some like human hedonistic act I'm about to engage in. Like this is a godly encounter. Like that is so profound and so unique to the Catholic faith.
Amen.
Right?
Yes.
So like it's that Fulton J. Sheen line of like, nobody hates the Catholic Church. They hate what they think the Catholic Church teaches. I'm like, because who can hate that?
I completely agree. Yes, I don't think not anyone, but definitely most times people are not thinking about that before intercourse by any means.
Right.
I think it's easier to reflect on that outside of that act for sure.
Right.
But to think about and envision just, so much grace coming from that for your marriage, for your family. That definitely, that's quite something to think about and ponder.
That part of the, that the sexual act is for babies and bonding, and how much more, if you will, that bonding is needed, right? In order to have the strength as that partnership, as that couple, the marriage, to then give life and to raise the life, all the hard things that come into it. Like we need that strong bonding, which is why it's important to remember it's not just the bonding of two, but the bonding of three, because we enter into it with God and with his grace. Like you just said, like that there is grace to be had in that act. There's grace to access. Emily, that's so cool. I hadn't thought about that, but you're so right. Like, yes, that sacrament is so powerful and you can access that grace in a lot of ways, but that you can access that grace. There's grace to be had there. Like, that is so cool. That is so cool. Or I'm just a really big nerd. Probably both.
I mean, no, it's not something I think about on the regular. I'm not going to lie. But I will say, I mean, in times, I would say I can feel the graces from it.
Right.
And I'm not really thinking maybe necessarily about that whole, communion of persons. But I could say that I understand. I can see it working in our lives.
Right. Well, I think it's with most things, right? Like I often go to Mass and my mind can be elsewhere and I'm not fully present and aware of all the amazingness that is happening and all the grace that is there. But I try to get myself in that mindset, when I go to Mass, even if it's for a split second while my kids are not talking to me and I just get like 1 minute on my knees and then, Mommy, I need this, or, I just get like 1 second and you're like, okay, Lord, please just give me something here. Like I'm here, I'm trying. And, but to transfer that to the bedroom and to say, okay, like I can pause, my spouse and I can come together. We can pause for a moment here and put ourselves in that mindset, like that same approach taken in other areas It can be taken there. It's just not common because we don't treat this as a culture, as a whole, as something sacred. We don't. And that's where it falls apart and people get hurt and it doesn't go well, like to think of it as something that is holy and that is sacred and not so holy like it's supposed to be put in a case and not touched, because that's not who God is, right? God did not put himself in a case to not be touched. God came among us. So it's supposed to be engaged in. And at the same time, it is a holy act.
Amen. We take God out of it in every capacity from, as we're talking about, from the moment of conception to birth. But even before conception occurs, we take God out of it by having intercourse outside of marriage. We take God out of it in so many capacities. So it's not unusual that people wouldn't think about God in any way, shape, or form. It's all about pleasure, right? That's what our society leans towards and focuses on, and so we can easily take God out of it. And so I think that's why the mindset doesn't go deeper with it, because we don't have to. We look everywhere we turn around. He's not depicted in human in that way in society.
And that irony of what you just said, right, is that by leaving God out of it, we're actually not getting the pleasure that we're seeking.
Absolutely.
Which is, again, ironic, right? Because like with all things, like, okay, God created this act. We are not, we are not, what is that? What is the heresy? The body is bad. What is that heresy?
Oh, I don't remember.
Puritanical? What I'm talking about.
Puritanical?
Something, there's a specific heresy I remember. That I can't remember the name of that. But yes, it's kind of like a Puritan.
Okay.
We believe the body is good. The pleasure enjoyed by the spouses during sex is a good thing. That should not be avoided. That's a good thing. And it's heightened when we have an understanding of what that pleasure is leading us towards. When we come together in that act and we're leading towards the pleasure creator, right? The pleasure giver, like that's coming from a source. And when we're connected to that source, our pleasure is heightened. When we're just seeking the pleasure, but we're not plugged into that source, it's very fleeting. It's momentary. And then we're on to the next thing. We're just looking for more, looking for more, looking for more. And that's true in any area of our life, right? It's, shiny, like looking over here, just looking for more. And that is the same in this context as well, just as in other desires in other areas.
I agree.
So, yeah. Okay. I think we did a pretty thorough job there. I hope.
I think it's not. I feel like it.
Yeah. Good. I feel like that was a good. Yeah. I just wanted, when I had read that this week, and I was like, I need to talk about that a little bit more, about that, the moment of conception, again, who God is. So
I wasn't even thinking about any of that. So that was good, because that is
I hadn't read it either.
I mean, you raised so many thoughts for me on just conveying more truth that I just take for granted now. So I wasn't thinking about it in that capacity.
Well, and me, just even saying that God is in the body. I don't know why that just hit me. Yes, God is in the body, that the body is good, that all of this is good. It just needs to be reoriented. And then, and the way that we think about it, that we can actually meditate on that goodness, and that's going to help us enjoy the good parts and the pleasure, and the unity is going to be greater, and there's going to be more grace. That it is an avenue to God. That is amazing. That is amazing. Just like religious, their celibacy is their path towards God, right? That there's great grace through that. That married couples have that access to God through their marital act. What were you going to say? Sorry.
Well, I was just going to mention, anything good, that's what the enemy wants to do, right? Just twist it. And so,
yes, that's true.
It's as simple as that. So everything can easily be twisted, as we can see, or anywhere we look around.
Because he can't create, he just destroys.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very true. Okay. All right. Well, I think that's it for this episode.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll see you guys all in the next one. Thanks, Emily.
Thanks, Amy.
That wraps up another episode of the NFP Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you found our discussion enlightening and empowering. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. We'd love to hear from you. Please connect with us by sending us an email with your questions and stories to thenfpshow@gmail.com. We'll be back next week with more insights, tips, and heartfelt conversations about natural family planning. Until then, love responsibly.